Greetings and salutations, all of my fellow American sovereigns. This is the Vocational Science of Freedom Saturday night civics and sovereignty class. And tonight we will be talking about and reading from Conspirators'Hierarchy, the story of the Committee of 300, written by Dr. John Coleman. And as a public service announcement for this evening, the Vocational Science of Freedom Revolt server has been taken down. And I sent in a ticket and complained about it. And those of you that are members of the VSOF and have joined our mega chat rooms, which was always our backup in case this ever were to happen, and it did. I put the back and the forth as far as the emails were concerned between myself and them, and the BS excuse that they gave as to why it was shut down. It's actually kind of hilarious. If you guys want to go read it, it's on the main VSOF chat on Mega. I think the main reason was because that I didn't realize that Revolt was a corporation that was chartered out of England and Wales. And their legislature, not all that long ago, decided to go full cuck and basically try and censor everything on the internet that they didn't like, including hate speech and everything else. And so my guess is that's probably why they took one look at our server and said, oh, goodbye. So that's what happened. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. This is literally the 5th time that this has happened to the VSOF. So we've been knocked off of platforms, chat platforms specifically, but also video platforms as well, 5 different times. And yes, AMAC, you're exactly right. Full Bolshevik. That's exactly what this is. And I also found the timing rather odd because it happened today right after I posted onto the video platforms what I was going to be talking about tonight, which is this book, which I'm absolutely 100% sure the dark occultist Luciferian filth want absolutely nothing to do with us ever talking about it. So anyway, the timing was crazy, and I felt like, well, you know what? It's probably time to really look deep into setting up a server that's either out of Dubai or out of Iceland. I think those are the only 2 places, aside from potentially Russia, but then if you talk anything bad about Russia, then they'll knock you off. Those are the only 2 places that I know pretty much for sure on the entire planet are the best places to actually have servers set up that the United States Federal Corporation can't take it out, and the EU can't take it out either. So I'll be looking into those. And if anybody listening to this wants to send me some information that they might know about how to do that easily or have a line in to any sort of server capacity in those 2 countries, feel free to send me a heads up and I'll definitely take a look at it and look into it. Okay, let's get on to our reading here. This is a fairly short book. I found it kind of by accident, stumbling around, looking into some research for some other things. Anyway, without further ado, the book is Conspirators'Hierarchy, the story of the Committee of the 300. And it was written all the way back in 1992. So this was the information that this gentleman had amassed all the way back then. Obviously, we're well aware of the fact that all of these societies, agencies, committees, groups have all ramped up their global slavery system pretty hard since 1992, without question. And even though I'm doing that, I think it's very, very important that everybody actually understand and see the totality of the 3-dimensional slave system. Because unless and until you fully understand it, you're always going to be trying to take the short route and say, oh, well, it's that. Or, oh, well, it's these people. Or, oh, well, it has to be that. Well, no, it's everything put together because they're all in on it together. And frankly, a lot of them tend to have a lot of infighting with each other because not all of them have the same exact worldview as to what they want in the very end. Now, a lot of it does overlap clearly, which is why they're getting a lot of these things done. But again, without being able to see the totality of every single group that's involved, you're always going to be lacking in knowledge. And that's something you should always do your absolute best to rectify as best as you possibly can and as quickly as you possibly can. So anyway, forward to this book. All right. In my career as a professional intelligence officer, I had many occasions to access highly classified documents. But during service as a political science officer in the field of Angola, West Africa, I had the opportunity to view a series of top secret classified documents which were unusually explicit. What I saw filled me with anger and resentment and launched me on a course from which I have not deviated, namely to uncover what power it is that controls and manages the British and United States governments. I was thoroughly familiar with all of the well-known secret societies, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, Trilaterals, the Zionists, Freemasonry, Bolshevism, Rosicrucianism, and all of the spin-offs of these secret societies. As an intelligence officer, and even before that, as a young student in the course of my studies at the British Museum in London, I had cut my teeth on all of them, plus a good number of others with whom I imagined Americans were familiar. But when I came to the United States in 1969, I found that names like the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Club of Rome, the German Marshall Fund, the Cine Foundation, that one I'm not familiar with, the Round Table, the Fabianites, that would just be the Fabian Society, or those that are members of the Fabian Society, the Venetian Black Nobility, the Mont Pelerin Society, another one I'm not familiar with, Hellfire Clubs, and many others were at best totally unknown here, or else their true functions were at best but poorly understood, if at all. In 1969, 1970, set about remedying the situation in a series of monographs and cassette tapes. Wow, that goes back quite a ways. Much to my surprise, I soon found plenty of people willing to quote these names as if they had known of them all of their writing careers, but who were not in the least bit knowledgeable about the subjects, yet quite unwilling to state the source of their lately acquired information. Well, yeah. Just to pause here and make a point about that. There have been some books that have been written even much farther back than this. Well, actually kind of around the time that he's talking about. Specifically, one of them is the book called Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. That was written by Carol Quigley, who was an insider in the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, he had access to all of their files, basically. He was a historian and a professor. Quigley was Bill Clinton's mentor, and he was obviously a mentor for a lot of other people as well. And he wrote this book, Tragedy and Hope, which is over 1,500 pages of fairly dry history. But in that book, it tells everything. It names names. It gives all the dates. It makes all the connections. And when he wrote that book, the publisher, which was Macmillan, I believe, somebody broke into Macmillan and broke all of the printing plates. Basically, they destroyed the capacity to continue to print the book. Now, obviously, whoever was the editor at Macmillan probably looked at this guy and was like, oh, well, he's Ivy League. He's writing this thing. Why should we have to read all of it? It's probably fine, right? Well, no, it wasn't, because it exposed everything. And then the book went underground for a long time, and private copies of it that people did actually purchase and had the capacity to have, they were reprinted privately and circulated around for a while until eventually the book was brought back around to being reprinted. So anyway, when he's talking about this history of like quoting names and so on and so forth, that one single book that's the most important to read is that book. Okay. All right. So to continue. So I consoled myself with the thought that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I pursued my investigations, pressing on the face of severe risks. Attacks on myself and my wife, financial losses, continual harassment, threats, all part of a carefully crafted and orchestrated program to discredit me, run by government agents and informers, embedded in the so-called Christian right wing, the identity movement, and right-wing patriot groups. These agents operated and still operate under cover of strong, fearless, outspoken opposition to Judaism, their main enemy, they would have us believe. These agent informers are led and controlled by a group of homosexuals who are well liked and well respected by political and religious conservatives all across the United States. Now, that's quite the hell of a statement. However, I found something the other day which kind of shocked the hell out of me. Not from what it said, because most of it I knew, but the fact that I even was able to find the damn thing. So I went looking around for research information based upon simply the name as the Sons of Liberty. I was curious as to know how many organizations called the Sons of Liberty have been since Sam Adams' original organization, the Sons of Liberty, from the colonial days. So as I was poking around, I came across this interesting report. Well, literally, it was a massive amount of FOIA requests from the FBI regarding all kinds of movements. And oh my God, were there so many things in there. I mean, everybody was named. The American Nazi Party under Commander Rockwell was in there. James Mason was in there regarding siege, and everybody in between you can possibly think about. And they have all the information. And it was just very interesting to read all of these FBI reports because they're all now declassified. And anyway, I put a link to that to a few select people when I found it. I sent it to Flood and I sent it to NNR and a few other people. But I will make sure to try and put it someplace into the show notes for this class. I'll drop in the place where I actually located it, which was obviously the only place you can find these things, was archive.org. And with it, whoever this guy was, and forgive me because I can't remember his name off the top of my head because I was just looking at this the other day, whoever did all these massive amount of FOIA requests, okay, Judicial Watch, the organization that does a lot of FOIA requests that most people probably know about. Anyway, that organization, Judicial Watch, doesn't hold a candle to what this guy had done throughout the totality of his life. And I downloaded the zipped files of all of the FOIA requests that I found in this particular link on archive.org. And it took me like 7 hours to download it. And remember, this is zipped files. And then when I unzipped it, it was still more zipped files inside the zipped file. So it was a tremendous amount of information. So anyway, I'll make sure that everybody has access to that. And I'm not trying to digress here, but what I'm saying is that in relation to this book, when talking about how to go about logical research into these things, you have to know where to go looking, and you have to go directly to sources, actual sources. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to state that and that little discovery, which I'll make sure that I get to everybody. Okay. But in relation to what we're talking about here tonight. So to continue. All right. Their program of calumny, lies, and hatred, disinformation about my work, even lately attributing it to other writers, continues unabated, but it has not had the desired effect. I shall carry on with my task until I have finally ripped off the mask of the entire secret upper-level parallel government that runs Britain and the United States. This book is a part of that ongoing effort. And then here's the table of contents real quick here. And I don't think I'm going to do a reading of this like in its totality. I just wanted all you guys to be able to get an introduction to this book, download it. It is in the mega link in the show notes for tonight. So you guys can go grab it and read it yourself. What I will be doing tonight, if I come across anything that's important, I'll also bring up the Vocational Science of Freedom timeline doc. And if I find any dates in here that I don't already have inserted into the timeline doc, I will be doing that in real time, kind of as a half homework assignment. And also so you guys can see how I continue to expand the timeline doc. And on a side note regarding the timeline doc, if anybody has yet to actually watch the VSOF timeline series, then you can do so by going to Vocational Science Freedom on Rumble and on Odyssey. I do not have the timeline class on YouTube, obviously. I will get around to posting all of it onto FTJ at some point. But anyway, so if you want to find it, go to the playlists on either of those platforms and then scroll down and it'll be down at the bottom. And it's called Lies and Thievery of 4,000 Years, The Old World History Anew, VSOF timeline class. And there's several hours, I think it's over 8 hours, of me systematically going through the totality of the Vocational Science Freedom Timeline doc. So if you want more connections as to what this gentleman is going to be speaking about in his book here, then that's the place where you definitely want to continue your deeper dive into these subjects, okay? All right, to start here, an overview and some case history. Certainly a fair number of us are aware that the people running our government are not the people who are really in control of political and economic matters, domestic and foreign. This has led many to seek the truth in the alternative press, those newsletter writers who, like me, have sought, but not always found, what it is that is making the United States terminally ill. Well, welcome to the Vocational Science of Freedom. That's pretty much all we do here. But anyway, to continue. Seek and ye shall find has not always been the case with this group. What we did find was that people walk in great darkness, mostly not caring or bothering to find out where their country is headed, firm in the belief that it will always be there for them, which is a terrible position to take once you start learning anything about history. But to continue, this is the way the largest population group has been manipulated to react, and their attitude plays right into the hands of the secret government. It's also an aspect of fifth generational warfare. We frequently hear about they, quote unquote, doing this, that, or the other. Quote unquote, they seems literally to be able to get away with murder. True. They increase taxes, send our sons and daughters to die in wars that do not benefit our country. They seem above our reach, out of sight, frustratingly nebulous when it comes to taking action against them. No one seems able to clearly identify who they are. Well, we know, but anyway. It is a situation that has pertained for decades. During the course of this book, we shall identify the mysterious they, and then, after that, it is up to the people to remedy their situation. On April 30th, 1981, I wrote a monograph disclosing the existence of the Club of Rome, identifying it as a committee of 300 subversive body. This was the first mention of both these organizations in the United States. I warned readers not to be fooled by the feeling that the article was far-fetched, and I drew a parallel between my article and the warning issued by the Bavarian government when the secret plans of the Illuminati fell into its hands. And there's the whole story behind that. All right, in short, I'll give the short version of that particular situation. So, as everybody should know, the Illuminati was established in 1776, and its mission was to infiltrate all Masonic lodges on the entire planet and basically control them, right? George Washington warned about this in a letter to someone, I can't remember who it was, but he said, beware of the new threat from the New York, of which has infiltrated our lodges. And then there was several other sentences that go along with that. So anyway, he was well aware of what was going on. And obviously, we all know that Washington was a very high-level Freemason. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form stating that Freemasonry prior to the infiltration by the Illuminati was some benevolent thing. I don't feel that, nor have I ever felt that. I think it's always been a system of control and a low-level filtration system for the Goy to fall into so that the Luciferian Jews can control societies. That's what I've always felt that it was. My mind has never really altered from that. And I've read plenty of books on the subject. And to me, it still all points to that direction. But anyway, so how did the Bavarian government find out about the secret plans of the Illuminati? Well, there happened to be a guy traveling on a horse from one location to another with these secret plans in his bag. The guy and the horse get struck by lightning and die instantly. I don't know about the horse, but it probably died too. Somebody comes along and finds this information and then gives it to the Bavarian government, of which they freak out and do what is necessary to basically purge this group and several other groups. That's all I'll say about it for now. There's plenty of more information you can go look regarding that story. But anyway, so we shall return to the Club of Rome and the role of the Committee of the 300 in U.S. affairs later herein. Many of the predictions made in that 1981 article have since come to pass, such as the unknown Felipe Gonzalez becoming Prime Minister of Spain and Mitterrand, might be pronouncing that incorrectly, being returned to power in France. The downfall of Giscard d'Estaing and Helmut Schmidt, the return of the power of the Swedish nobleman and the Committee of 300 members, Olof Palme. Now, I don't know any of these names. If anybody else does, great. Obviously must have been things that happened prior to 81 or during around 81. But anyway, all right, and then to continue. The nullifying of Reagan's presidency and the destruction of our steel, auto, and housing industries in terms of the post-industrial zero-growth order handed down by the Committee of 300. Right. That's also very much, that whole philosophy and aspect of that is also something that the Club of Rome very much is a part of as well. The whole zero growth idea, and that there's too many people on the planet and they're all useless eaters and we have to get rid of all of them, that sort of thing. Typical genocidal attitude towards those who are sitting up high on a throne and are worried that all the guns are pointed at them, which of course they are for those that know who to point them at. But to continue. All right. The importance of Palme lies in the use made of him by the Club of Rome to deliver technology to the Soviet Union on the forbidden list of the U.S. Customs, and Palme's worldwide communications network employed to train the spotlight on the phony Iran hostage crisis while he shuttered back and forth between Washington and Tehran in an effort to undermine the sovereign integrity of the U.S. and place the phony crisis at the realm of a Committee of 300 institution, vis-a-vis the World Court at The Hague, Holland. Because every time that they have a crisis that basically they create, they always point to one of their power structures that they've invented to say, oh, we should take it there. They're the ones that should have authority, right? This is typical modus operandi for them and always has been. All right, so in what is, in fact, an open conspiracy against God and man, which includes enslaving the majority of humans left on this earth after wars, plagues, and mass murder have done with them, is not well hidden. In the intelligence community, it is taught that the best way to hide something is to place it in open view. As an example of the foregoing, when Germany wanted to hide its prize new Messerschmitt fighter plane in 1938, the aircraft was put on display at the Paris Air Show. While secret agents and spies were collecting information from hollow tree trunks and from behind loose bricks in a wall, the information they sought was staring them right in the face. The upper-level parallel secret government does not operate from dank basements and secret underground chambers. It places itself in full view in the White House, Congress, and in number 10 Downing Street and the House of Parliament. It is akin to those weird and supposedly terrifying monster films, where the monster appears with distorted features, long hair, and even longer teeth, growling and enslavering all over the place. This is distraction. The real monsters wear business suits and drive to work on Capitol Hill in limousines. These men are in open view all the time. These men are the servants of the one world government, New World Order. Like the rapist who stops to offer his victim a friendly ride, he does not look like the monster he is. If he did, his intended victim would run off screaming in fright. The same applies to government at all levels. President Bush does not look like a dutiful servant of the upper-level parallel government, but make no mistake about it, he is as much a monster as are those horrors found in horror movies. Well, obviously, and I don't even know which President Bush he's talking about, probably the first one. And if he is talking about the first one, that kind of seems like a misnomer because this guy of all people would obviously know that Bush used to run the CIA. So, yeah, Anyway, to continue. Stop for a moment and consider how President Bush ordered the brutal slaying of 150,000 Iraqi troops in a convoy of military vehicles carrying white flags on their way back to Iraq under Geneva Convention rules of agreed disengagement and withdrawal. Imagine the horror of the Iraqi troops when, in spite of waving their white flags, they were mowed down by American aircraft. In another part of the front, 12,000 Iraqi soldiers were buried alive in trenches they occupied. Is that not monstrous in the truest sense of the word? I would say yes. From where did President Bush get his orders to act in this monstrous fashion? He got them from the Royal Institute of International Affairs, who received its mandate from the Committee of 300, also known as the quote-unquote Olympians. As we shall see, even the Olympians do not hide their faces. Oftentimes, they put on a show which could be likened to the Paris Air Show, even as conspiracy buffs spend their time in fruitless searching in the wrong places and in the wrong direction. Note how Queen Elizabeth II, who's now dead, goodbye and good riddance, performs the ceremonial opening of the British Parliament. There, in full view, is the head of the Committee of 300. And to pause here and make a point, there are videos, because they broadcasted them, of the totality of that bitch's coronation ceremony. You want to talk about ritual? Go watch that sometime. And if you're lucky enough to find the video that I found, there's some very interesting commentary as to what they're doing, why they're doing it, who's there, and for what reasons. So anyway, all of this is thousands of year old dark occultist fuckery, and everybody had better wake up to it, or else tomorrow you might not wake up. To continue, have you ever witnessed the swearing-in ceremony of a United States president? There in full view is another member of the Committee of 300. The problem is only one of perception. Who are the conspirators who serve the almighty, all-powerful Committee of 300? The better informed of our citizens are aware that there is a conspiracy, and that the conspiracy goes under various names such as the Illuminati, Freemasonry, the Round Table, the Milner Group, and that list could probably go on for another 20 pages. To them, the CFR and the Trilaterals represent most of what they do not like in regard to domestic and foreign policy. Some even know that the Round Table has a big input into United States affairs through the British ambassador in Washington. The problem is that real hard information on the treasonous activities of members of the invisible government is very hard to come by. Well, I would say not anymore. I'd say it's actually fairly easy to find the treasonous activities of the members of the invisible government, because there are now so many alternative news platforms, including Breaking Spectre and a few other people that are actually members of the VSOF, that's all they do all day. They tell you what the treasonous activities are of these people. And you also have to remember the time frame of when this guy's writing this. Way back in the 80s. All right. So, he published it in 92? So anyway, the internet came around, people. This is not an unknown thing anymore. We can share it. Now, of course, the situation that the VSOF ran into today, obviously they don't want you to share it. They want to make sure that every single platform and every single place where this information is amassed, where it's culminated, where people talk about it openly, and yes, even let go of our justified rage in our own chat rooms, is something that they do not want. So it's a good thing that we have it. And it's a good thing that we meet on a regular basis. And it's a good thing that we have backup platforms. I made sure that the last time that the VSOF got knocked off, that I forced everybody to join Mega. Mega, they're not going to be able to shut down. Okay? It's impossible. Because Kim.com knows who the enemy is. And he made sure that he set up a system that is impossible for them to even come at him to say, oh, we want this or that person shut down. He doesn't even keep the passwords on Mega. Only you do. And if you lose them, you're never getting back on. and you lose all your stuff. But that's a good way to do it. It's not unlike other people who set up very good systems to make sure that people could give information about treasonous activities to others, like Julian Assange when he set up WikiLeaks. Same idea. Now, the main reason that we at the VSOF all stay anonymous is that there's not one single leader, right? So I don't care how many of the platforms get knocked down from VSOF. I'm just going to put up another one. I'm going to get better at what I do. I'm going to make sure that the next time we put this up, there is absolutely no way that the Luciferian fucks can ever take it down again. So again, private servers in particular countries that I already spoke about, but you get the point. Okay, so to continue. So I quote the profound statement by the prophet Hosea, which is found in the Christian Bible. Quote, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Close quote. Some may already have heard of my expose of the foreign aid scandal in which work I named several conspiratorial organizations, whose number is in legion. Yes, exactly. Their final objective was to overthrow the United States Constitution and the merging of this country, chosen by God and his country, with a godless New World Order government, which will return the world to conditions far worse than existed in the Dark Ages. True. So let us talk about actual case histories. The attempt to communize and deindustrialize Italy. The Committee of 300 long ago decreed that there shall be a smaller, much smaller, and better world. That is their idea of what constitutes a better world. Case in point with that would have been the Georgia Guidestones, which somebody in America said, fuck that, and blew them all to smithereens. A very good thing to do, and I think that was a very good message to send to these cocksuckers. But to continue. All right. The myriad of useless eaters consuming scarce natural resources were to be culled. Industrial progress supports population growth. Therefore, the command to multiply and subdue the earth found in Genesis had to be subverted. This called for an attack upon Christianity. The slow but sure disintegration of industrial nation states, the destruction of hundreds of millions of people, referred to the Committee of 300 as surplus population, and the removal of any leader who dared to stand in the way of the committee's global planning to reach the foregoing objectives. Two of the committee's earliest targets were Italy and Pakistan. The late Aldo Moro, Prime Minister of Italy, was one leader who opposed zero growth and population reductions planned for his country, thereby incurring the wrath of the Club of Rome, commissioned by the Olympians, to carry out its policies in this regard. In a Rome courtroom on November 10th, 1982, a close friend of Moro's testified that the former prime minister was threatened by an agent of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, who is also a Committee of 300 member, while he was still the U.S. Secretary of State. This meteoric rise of the man the witness named as Henry Kissinger will be dealt with later. Yeah, you can get through Kissinger's whole entire story, where he came from, what his background was, and how much they paid him to join all this, and so on and so forth. Kissinger has always been basically a Luciferian strategist for the destruction of all mankind, and they were like, ooh, we like this guy, so they obviously brought him in. But he's also dead too, so good riddance to you, bastard. All right, to continue. It will be recalled that Prime Minister Moro was kidnapped by the Red Brigades in 1978 and subsequently brutally shot to death. It was at the trial of members of the Red Brigades that several of them testified to the fact that they knew of high-level U.S. involvement in the plot to kill Moro. When threatening Moro, Kissinger was obviously not carrying out U.S. foreign policy, but rather acting accordingly to instructions received from the Club of Rome, the foreign policy arm of the Committee of 300. The witnesses who delivered the bombshell in open court was a close associate of Moro's, Gorando Girzoni. His explosive testimony was broadcast over Italian television and radio on November 10th, 1982. Oh, whoops. And printed in several Italian newspapers. Yet this vital information was suppressed in the U.S. Well, makes sense. Those famous bastions of freedom, with a compelling right to know, the Washington Post and the New York Times, right, whatever, did not think it important to even print a single line of Girzoni's testimony. Of course not, because they're controlled by the same group of people. Nor was the news carried by any of the wire services or television stations. The fact that that Italy's Aldo Moro had been a leading politician for decades, who was kidnapped in broad daylight in the spring of 1978, all of his bodyguards butchered in cold blood, was not deemed newsworthy, even though Kissinger stood accused as an accomplice to these crimes? Or was the silence because of Kissinger's involvement? Probably. In my 1982 expose of this heinous crime, I demonstrated that Aldo Moro, a loyal member of the Christian Democratic Party, was murdered by assassinations controlled by P2 masonry lodges, with the object of bringing Italy into line with the Club of Rome orders to deindustrialize the country and considerably reduce its population. Right. Moro's plans to stabilize Italy through full employment and industrial and political peace would have strengthened Catholic opposition to communism and made the destabilization of the Middle East a prime goal that much harder. Right, obviously. Because all of the communistic aspects of the world are controlled by these people. That's always been true. Just take a look at, Russia's history, particularly the slaughtering of the Tsar, his entire family, the Bolsheviks, and how Wall Street funded them. But anyway, to continue. From the foregoing, it becomes clear just how far ahead the conspirators plan. Right, by a couple hundred years at least. They do not think in terms of a 5-year plan. One needs to go back to Weishaupt's. That would be okay. So does everybody know who Weishaupt is? Hope so. He was the guy that the Rothschilds recruited to establish and set up the Illuminati. Okay. Yes, Adam. Thank you, Spectre. Adam Weishaupt. So he's the one that set up the Illuminati and was told to go and infiltrate all of the Freemason lodges to control them. Okay. So one needs to go back to Weishaupt's statements about the early Catholic Church to understand what was involved in the murder of Aldo Moro. Moro's death removed the roadblocks to the plans to destabilize Italy, and as we now know, enabled conspiracy plans for the Middle East to be carried out in the Gulf Wars 14 years later. Italy was chosen as a test target by the Committee of 300. Italy is important to the conspirators' plans because it is the closest European country to the Middle East, linked to Middle East economics and politics. It is also the home of the Catholic Church, which Weishaupt ordered destroyed, and home for some of Europe's most powerful top oligarchical families of the ancient black nobility. That would be the Venetian black nobility, if anybody doesn't know their story. But that's a rabbit hole that would take up several class times, and I don't want to get into it. But anyway, all right, to continue. Should Italy have been weakened by Moro's death, it would have had repercussions in the Middle East, which would have weakened U.S. influence in the region. Italy is important for another reason. It is a gateway for drugs entering Europe from Iran and Lebanon, and we shall return to that subject in due course. Various groups had combined under the name of socialism to bring about the downfall of several Italian governments since the Club of Rome was established in 1968. I'm going to double check and see if I have that in the timeline. 1968. Okay, 1968, Club of Rome was established. Okay, that's all I have as an entry, but all right, so be it. At least I've got something in there. Okay, just checking. So, to continue. Among these are the black nobility of Venice and Genoa, P2 Masonry, and the Red Brigades, all working for the same goals. Police investigators in Rome working on the Red Brigades Aldo Moro case came across the names of several very prominent Italian families working closely with this terrorist group. Right. I can name names, but he probably will later, so I won't bother. The police also discovered evidence that in at least a dozen cases, these powerful and prominent families had allowed their homes and or property to be used as safe houses for Red Brigade cells. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah, right, Spectre. Does history repeat or does it rhyme? Yeah, well, in this case, it's rhyming pretty well. America's nobility, quote unquote, were doing their share to destroy the Republic of Italy. A notable contribution having come from Richard Gardner, even while in his official capacity as President Carter's ambassador to Rome. At that time, Gardner was operating under the direct control of Benito Craxi? Don't know how to pronounce that. An important member of the Club of Rome and a key man in NATO. Benito was the leading edge of the conspirators' attempts to destroy the Italian Republic. As we shall see, Benito was almost successful in ruining Italy. And as the conspirators' hierarchy's leading player, was able to get divorce and abortion pushed through the Italian parliament, resulting in the most far-reaching and destructive religious and social changes ever to strike at the Catholic Church, and consequently, the morals of the Italian nation. Okay, that's an interesting piece of fact. There's no date there, but I'm just going to highlight this for myself and come back and add that to the timeline later. I'll figure out when he did that. Okay, after President Ronald Reagan was elected, an important meeting was held in Washington, D.C. on December 1980 under the auspices of the Club of Rome and the Socialist International. Both these organizations are directly responsible to the Committee of 300. The main agenda was to formulate ways and means of how to neutralize the Reagan presidency. Well, they did that through Iran-Contra and a few other things, I'm sure. A group plan was adopted, and as we look back, it is perfectly clear that the plan the conspirators agreed to follow has been very successful. True. Spectre said, Maloney just tried to shut down immigration into Italy and reestablish sovereignty. Brussels' unelected bureaucrats is trying to overrule Melani's attempts right now. Right, so Italy's still going through the same war with these people that, well, every single nation in the world is going through with these people, unless they've already been completely 100% taken over, like, unfortunately, the Chinese and probably a few others. But, yeah. So as you said, does history repeat or does it rhyme? Yeah, well, again, you got the same thing going on. Okay. In order to get an idea how vast and all-pervasive is this conspiracy, it would be appropriate at this time to name the goals set by the Committee of 300 for the pending conquest and control of the world. There are at least 40 known, quote-unquote, branch offices of the Committee of 300. Oh, great, they've got addresses. Let's go find them. And we shall be listing them all together with a description of their functions. This brings me back to something somebody once said, and I don't recall who it was, but they said, very wisely, that these people have names and addresses. This is true. Why the entire planet doesn't act on that is beyond me. But anyway, to continue. Once this is studied, it becomes easy to understand how one central conspiratorial body is able to operate so successfully, and why it is that no power on earth can withstand their onslaught against the very foundations of a civilized, progressive world based on freedom of the individual, especially as it is declared in the United States Constitution. Well, more specifically, how it's declared in the Declaration of Independence. The whole world part really isn't obviously our problem, meaning we as American sovereigns. It's not our problem to free the world, clearly. We freed ourselves from it, and then we ended up giving the vast majority of it back because what we took by force of arms, they have taken back by force of insight. And we need to regain it by insight again. So to continue, thanks to the sworn testimony of Giorgione, Italy and Europe, but not the U.S., learned that Kissinger was behind the death of Aldo Moro. This tragic affair demonstrates the ability of the Committee of 300 to impose its will upon any government without exception. Secure in its position as a member of the most powerful secret society in the world, and I am not talking about Freemasonry, Kissinger not only terrified Moro, but carried through on his threats to eliminate Moro if he did not give up his plan to bring economic and industrial progress to Italy. In June and July of 1982, the wife of Aldo Moro testified in open court that her husband's murder came about as a result of serious threats against his life made by what she called, quote, a high-ranking United States political figure, close quote. Mrs. Moro repeated the precise phrase reportedly used by Kissinger in the sworn testimony of Giorgione. Quote, either you stop your political line or you will pay dearly for it, close quote. Recalled by the judge, Giorgione was asked if he could identify the person Mrs. Moro was talking about. Giorgione replied that it was indeed Henry Kissinger. as he had previously intimated. Girzani went on to explain to the court that Kissinger had made his threats in Moro's hotel room during the Italian leader's official visit to the U.S. Moro, then Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Italy, a NATO member country, was a man of high rank, one who should never have been subjected to mafia-like pressures and threats. Well, yeah. Welcome to the Khazarian mob. Moro was accompanied on his American visit by the President of Italy in his official capacity. Kissinger was then, and still is, an important agent of the service of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, a member of the Club of Rome and the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, not anymore because he's dead. Spectre says, just because Aldous Huxley was right, the masses will come to rather enjoy their slavery via all the conveniences it provides. True. Bread and circuses, anyone? Kissinger's role in destabilizing the United States by means of 3 wars, the Middle East, Korea, and Vietnam, is well known, as is his role in the Gulf War, in which the U.S. Army acted as mercenaries for the Committee of 300 in bringing Kuwait back under its control and at the same time making an example out of Iraq so that other small nations would not be tempted to work out their own destiny. Right. Tree of Liberty, people, from time to time. Kissinger also threatened the late Ali Bhutto, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, president of the sovereign nation of Pakistan. Bhutto's crime was that he favored nuclear weapons for his country. As a Muslim state, Pakistan felt threatened by continued Israeli aggression in the Middle East. Well, no shit. Bhutto was judicially murdered in 1979 by the Council on Foreign Relations representative in the country, General Zia al-Haq. I don't even know how to pronounce that. H-A-Q, some strange pronunciation. Okay, so in his planned ascent to power, ul-Haq, I'm just going to call him Haq. It's probably not how it's pronounced, but it's funny, encouraged a frenzied mob to set fire to the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad in an apparent attempt to show the CFR that he was his own man and to secure more foreign aid. And it was later learned to murder Richard Helms. Oh, I remember that whole, yeah. Huh, all right. So that was what was going on. Okay, in the background. Got it. All right, several years later, Haq paid with his life for intervening in the war raging in Afghanistan. His C-130 Hercules aircraft was hit by ELF, electronic low frequency. No kidding. That's a good way to magically drop something out of the sky now, isn't it? Shot shortly after it took off, causing the aircraft to loop into the ground. The Club of Rome, acting on the Committee of 300 orders to eliminate General Haq, had no compunction in sacrificing the lives of a number of U.S. servicemen on board the flight. Right. Collateral damage, people, including a U.S. Army Defense Intelligence Agency group headed by Brigadier General Herbert Wasson. General Haq had been warned by the Turkish Secret Service not to travel by plane as he was targeted for a mid-air bombing. With this in mind, Haq took the United States team with him as an insurance policy. It wasn't that nice of you, dipshit. Anyway, yeah. You would think somebody in his position would realize that they don't give a damn about wasting American servicemen pretty much anytime they feel like. Without hesitation. Anyway. As he commented to his inner circle advisors, right? In my 1989 work, Terror and the Skies, I gave the following account of what happened. Shortly before Haq's C-130 took off from Pakistan military base, a suspicious-looking truck was seen close to the hangar that had housed the C-130. The tower control warned base security, but by the time action was taken, the C-130 was already airborne and the truck had gone. A few minutes later, the plane began looping in the air until it hit the ground and exploded in a ball of fire. Right. There is no explanation for such behavior by the C-130, an aircraft with a marvelously reliable record, true, and joint Pakistani-United States Board of Inquiry found no pilot error or mechanical or structural failure. Well, of course, because we know that the thing was taken down by an elf. All right. That the Soviet Union had been able to develop high-peak radio frequency devices known to the West through the work of Soviet scientists who work in the Kurchatov Atomic Energy Institute's intensive relativistic electron beam division. Two of its specialists were Y.A. Yingarov and A.A. Ruckheads, another one I don't know how to pronounce. Both scientists work with the Lead Physicist Institute, which specializes in electronic and X-ray lasers. And of course, all of that technology has been ridiculously advanced since then. After receiving this information, I searched for confirmation from other sources and found that in England, the International Journal of Electronics had published some material about which appeared to confirm the information given to me about the method chosen to shoot down Hack C-130. In addition, the information was confirmed by two of my intelligence sources. I received some useful information from a Soviet science paper on these subjects, published in English under the title Soviet Radio Electronics and Communication Systems. There was no doubt in my mind that General Hack had been murdered. The truck seen near the C-130 hangar undoubtedly carried a mobile ELF device of that type of Soviet armed forces known to possess. Right. Well, now, what is the term now that people like to throw around kind of jokingly? Right? We all know what it is. Jewish space lasers. Well, shit. I have the pictures of what these things look like. Not only that, I have the patent numbers for what these things look like that are attached on the front of very large planes and are very high level focused laser systems that can start fires wherever the hell they want to, whenever the hell they want to, and to whatever extent they want to, which would be things like, the Hawaii fires and the California fires, right? Everybody had seen lasers coming from the sky. Well, guess what? Beams of light don't just come magically out of nowhere. And no, by the way, it's not the finger of God. It's the finger of Satan, run by these fuckers. But anyway, I digress. Back to this. Accordingly to written testimony by Brutto, smuggled out of the country while he was in prison, Kissinger severely threatened him. Quote, "I will make a horrible example if you continue with your nation-building policies." Close quote. Bhutto and afoul of Kissinger and the Club of Rome by calling for a nuclear energy program to begin Pakistan. To being Pakistan in a modern industrialized state, which, in the eyes of the Committee of 300, was a direct contravention of its orders delivered by Kissinger to the Pakistani government. What Kissinger was doing when he threatened Bhutto was not official U.S. policy, but the policy of the modern-day Illuminati. One needs to have a clear understanding of just why it is that nuclear power is so hated all over the world, and why the fake environmentalist movement established and financially supported by the Club of Rome was called upon to wage war on nuclear energy. Exactly. Anyway, I could go down the rabbit hole of nuclear energy and all of it, but I won't. There was someone who was on, I think there was somebody who was on Sean Ryan's show not all that long ago, who did a very good job of explaining all the aspects of nuclear energy. And I think he also spoke upon those that want it destroyed, which is exactly what this guy's talking about. Okay. So anyway, to continue. With nuclear energy generating electricity in cheap and abundant supplies, third world countries would gradually become independent of U.S. foreign aid and begin to assert their sovereignty. True. Self-reliance, and I don't care if this is nation or individual, because it all starts with the individual. Self-reliance is your most surest defense against tyranny. Okay? Remember that I said that. Nuclear generated electricity is the key to bringing third world countries out of their backward state, a state which the Committee of 300 has ordered to remain in position. Less foreign aid means less control of a country's natural resources by the IMF. Right. There you get to the highest level of the monster. The National Monetary Fund and how they run their special drawing rights with each and every central bank that is connected to them, that is the totality of this slave system. Your birth certificates are registered. They then take control of your productive value. That's why you are called a human resource. What is the IMF drawing off of in its special drawing rights? Your human productive value. That is the only currency that exists now in the world, save from what we American sovereigns use when we have the brains enough to use it, which is gold and silver. The rest of the world doesn't have that. And they certainly don't have it by lawful decree of their own constitution. Luckily, we do. So, when we the people get off our ass and fix this, it shouldn't be too difficult to go back to a situation of which these filthy Luciferian globalist cocksuckers control our republic and our own buying power. Right? You can't be debanked if all of your wealth is in physical gold and silver. Sorry, doesn't work that way. Now, can they stop you from doing certain things online? Okay, fine, maybe. But then, ibid what I said earlier. Self-reliance is the answer. Okay? But to continue. All right. It was this idea of developing nations taking charge of their destiny that was anathema to the Club of Rome and its ruling committee of 300. We have seen opposition to nuclear power in the United States successfully used to block industrial development in conformity with the club's post-industrial zero-growth plans. Dependence on U.S. foreign aid actually keeps foreign countries in servitude to the Council on Foreign Relations. Right. Let's take that. Okay, so that's the macro level. Take it to the micro level. If you take a benefit from this fucking corporation masquerading as a de jure government, you are doing the same thing. Stop taking benefits from any of them for any reason. Stop getting licenses. Stop asking permission for doing things that are lawful under natural law and under our own common law, and take responsibility for your own actions. Because if you keep taking benefits from them, you're going to be subservient to them. And I will remind everyone here that the definition of a slave is someone who is dependent upon something else or someone else. That's the definition of a slave. So you don't want to be a slave? Stop taking benefits. Stop asking permission. Learn how to get out of this system. And most importantly, get your vocational science freedom status docs done so that you can tell them on public record as a sovereign to clearly fuck off. Draw that line in the sand. It's the only way out of this, people. If all of us do this collectively. So to continue, the people of the recipient countries receive very little of the money, as it usually ends up in the pockets of government leaders who allow the natural raw material assets of the country to be savagely stripped by the IMF. Mugambi of Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, is a good example of how raw material assets, in this case high-grade chrome ore, is controlled through foreign aid. Right. There's a whole history of Rhodesia, but I'll skip that one. I'll open that up in a second, Spectre. That looks like an interesting article from Zero Hedge. Okay, so Lorino, the giant conglomerate run by Angus Ogilvy, an important member of the Committee of 300, on behalf of his cousin, Queen Elizabeth II, you got to be shitting me, now has total control of this valuable resource while the people in the country sink ever deeper into poverty and misery, notwithstanding a handout in excess of $300 million from the United States. Right. Well, why did Rhodesia initially get destroyed, or how did it originally get destroyed? Well, it was to go in there and kill all of the white people who were living there at the time of their own volition and running things the way that they wanted to. Kind of exactly what's going on with South Africa at the moment. Okay, Lorino now has monopoly of Rhodesia chrome and charges any price it likes, of course. Whereas under the Smith government, this was not allowed. A reasonable price level was maintained for 25 years prior to the Mugambi regime taking power, right, and slaughtering all of the white people. While there were problems during the 14-year rule of Ian Smith, since his departure, unemployment has quadrupled in Zimbabwe, is in a state of chaos and de facto bankruptcy. Right. Nobody really thinks about this anymore, but the joke about the $1 million or million, whatever the hell Zimbabwe called their currency, these $1 million notes that were being, pushed out of Zimbabwe, and then all of these, and sorry if you happen to be one and you're listening, but sorry to all of these retards who ever thought that they were going to somehow eventually revalue Zimbabwe currency and everybody was going to get rich from the people that had this worthless fiat garbage. You fell into a trap. That's all you did. run by these Khazarian, Luciferian fools. Yeah, actually, trillions. Good point, Spectre. Okay, so anyway, so Mugabe received enough foreign aid from the U.S. in the reign of 300 million per annum to enable him to build 3 hotels on the French and Monte Carlo, while his citizens grapple with disease, unemployment, and malnutrition, not to mention an iron-fisted dictatorship that allows no complaints. True, this is, all right, this whole totality of what happened to Rhodesia, what's happening to South Africa, and every other nation that it's going to happen to, is all a basis of how global Jewry first took over England and then established all of the English Empire, was by this model. You go into a country, you set up just enough infrastructure to get all of the raw resources out of the country, and then you lie to them and say, oh, we'll provide schools for you, we'll provide this for you, we'll provide that for you. Well, what gets provided, particularly in the school systems, is we're going to indoctrinate you into loving your slavery. And then as far as the rest of the quote unquote infrastructure is concerned, they only ever build railroads from the mines to the ports. That's it. And people think they're getting something when they're not. And then when it comes to any other type of infrastructure, say like, oh, I don't know, electricity or water, well, then your water bill goes cranked up and you can no longer afford water. This is the regular modus operandi of colonialism, right? And who perfected it? The English. So, yeah. Spectre says, I have a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note right next to a silver round. Yeah, they're probably about the same actual worth, truth be told. Okay, so where was I? All right. Okay, contrast this with the Smith government, which never asked nor received 1 red cent in aid from the United States. Thus, it is clear that foreign aid is a powerful means of exercising control of countries such as Zimbabwe and indeed all African countries. Well, any country that has a central bank. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. It also keeps U.S. citizens in a state of involuntary servitude and therefore less able to mount meaningful opposition to government. Again, self-reliance, people. David Rockefeller knew what he was doing when his foreign aid bill came into law in 1946. It has since then become one of the most hated laws on the statute books following public exposure of what it is, a racket run by the government and paid for by we, the American people. Right. Okay. Take this and then expand it into what Musk found with Doge and U.S. foreign aid. Right. That's exactly the same situation, but 10 times worse and coming again, many, many, many decades after the creation of this fuckery. So, all right, to continue. How can the conspirators maintain their grip upon the world, and more especially their chokehold over the U.S. and Britain? Well, before he answers, I'm going to say one single answer to that question. It's law. That's how they do it. That's how the attorney enslaves the world, is through law. Right? That's why you need to become a lawyer, because a lawyer, the term lawyer means know the law. The term attorney means someone who attorns. To attorn something is to take from someone and give it to someone else. That's why the attorney is your mortal enemy. To continue, one of the most asked questions is, quote, how can any single entity know at all times what is going on, and how is control exercised? This book will attempt to answer these questions and other questions. The only way we can come to grips with the reality of the conspirator's success is by mentioning and discussing the secret societies, front organizations, government agencies, banks, insurance companies, international businesses, the petroleum industry, and the hundreds of thousands of entities and foundations whose leading lights make up the membership of the Committee of 300. The ultimate controlling body that runs the world and has done so for at least 100 years. Yes, all of it. And I would also include the thing that he didn't mention, which I just made the point of, that I answered the question before he even got there. Attorneys, like the Bar Association, they are the single greatest threat. None of these fuckers would be able to do what they're doing without being able to alter and control and destroy law. Okay? None of it. You wouldn't have any of it without that. But nobody pays attention to that part of it. So anyway, I think I'll pause here. We've gotten a little bit over time. We're about to an hour. So maybe I'll read this next Saturday as well. This is quite an interesting read, and there are actually quite a bit of connections being made here. Oh, by the way, what I will do is I'll take a look at that Zero Hedge article that Spectre brought up real quick. We'll see what that is talking about. Get this up here for a second. Make sure you guys can see it. Okay. This is talking about the modern slave. Ah, yes. Authored by Josh Stallman at the Brownstone Institute. The best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in prison. Dostoevsky. Another one. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free. That's Goethe. Most people hear modern slavery and picture trafficking victims or sweatshop workers suffering that's clearly visible, obviously wrong, and comfortably distant from their daily lives. What if the most effective slavery in history isn't hidden, but public, celebrated, and defended by the very people it enslaves? Right. This is their modus operandi, right? Invisible shackles, the comfortable cage, the evolution of bondage, which is literally fifth generation warfare, which is why all you guys should go watch the class that I did on fifth generation warfare, which wasn't all that long ago. The financial DNA of control. Yep. How they do that. The divided plantation. Right. So we war with each other instead of going after the actual bastards that are doing this. Technological leash titans. Right. Case in point today, the VSOF getting knocked off of yet another server. The war of consciousness documented in patience. Yes, this is to control your mind. Remember those easements running through your mind at all times. That's the biggest problem. Engineered behavioral dependency. Oh, I'm going to take some of these infographics. These are great. Soft enforcement layer. Right flank tax. Diploma tax. Leaving Cuba difficult of exiting the island. Yeah. Global architecture. This is a very long article, but anyway, good stuff. Yeah. Case in point, August 6th. This is a pretty recent article. You guys I would definitely, yes, bookmark this and read it as well, going along with what we're talking about here tonight. Looks like a good continuation of the subject. Okay. So Spectre said, and bring in AI data centers, your electricity bill goes up. Yeah. So here we are. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that little read. Again, the book is in the mega file in the show notes. Go download it. Continue to read it. I might read some more of it, or I might do some highlights of it maybe next Saturday. But if I don't, again, this was your introduction to The Conspirator's Hierarchy by Dr. John Coleman. Know your enemy, people. So I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, being on the VSOF mega platform, which is now the last place that we have to hang out until I build a new one. And thanks everybody on Rumble for hanging out, Not Nerdy, AMAC, Big Smalls, Harley T, and all the rest of you. It's good to see you guys. And for VSOF members, I'll see all you guys on Wednesday for Roundtable. And then next Saturday will be the live VSOF class. So I won't be doing any reading except live to the group of people who come to the class. And if you want to figure out how to do that, go to thevocationalscienceofreedom.org and go to classes, and all of the information regarding the upcoming live class will be there available for you. All right. So that's it. Till next time. Hope all you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And as always, stay safe and stay sovereign.